Hey everyone, I'm Jonah,
No, I'm Connor.
and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. Patrick Mahomes and Dylan Raiola and the Nebraska Cornhuskers went 7-6 last season. And honestly, compared to their projections and what everybody was hoping, it was a little bit disappointing for Nebraska fans. They've had a lot of seasons these past couple years where they've been expected to get 8 or 9 wins and fall just a win or two short. So is this the year that Nebraska can finally break through and finally start to contend in the Big Ten again as one of the conference's blue bloods? Looking at their schedule, there's a few games that really stick out here. You got a home game against Michigan, as well as a road trip to Minnesota and Penn State. Going to be some of their toughest games this season, but they have 7 games in Memorial Stadium, as well as 5 on the road, and that gives them a schedule difficulty of 3.5 out of 10.
Starting the season off on the road against the Cincinnati Bearcats. Cincinnati has not fully recovered from their college football playoff appearance a couple years ago. Always sticking around mediocrity. Nebraska kind of in that same boat. I like Nebraska a little bit more in this situation, though. We saw that at their peak, Nebraska was a very tough team to play against. Not necessarily to beat, because even then, like Jonah was saying, they finished 7-5 or right around 6, 7, 8 wins pretty consistently the last couple of years. But I do think with a year under his belt, Dylan Raiola is going to have a little bit improvement. Not to mention they have a very young backfield with running backs Dante Dowdle and Emmett Johnson, along with a very solid defense. I think Nebraska has all the pieces to be very successful, but starting the season off on the road against Cincinnati team that is looking a little bit better compared to last season. It's going to be a little bit tough, but we're going to lean the Cornhuskers a little bit, giving them a 65% chance to get a win to start the season off on the road. Then they will face the Akron Zips. Akron was a very good team out of the MAC. At least they ended the season very successfully, had a couple wins in a row. But compared to Nebraska, it's not going to be much of a chance for the Zips in this one. 100% chance for the Cornhuskers to get the win at home. Same thing with Houston Christian. I could not tell you a single thing about Houston Christian. I don't even know who their mascot is, but 100% chance for Nebraska to get another win at home here for welcoming the Michigan Wolverines to Memorial Stadium. This should be a very interesting game. I believe this is going to be Bryce Underwood, assuming he's the starting quarterback at Michigan. This will be his first Big Ten matchup of the season. If not, it would be his second. But this will be an interesting matchup considering that it's going to be between two very athletic and dynamic quarterbacks with Dylan Raiola and Bryce Underwood. With it being at home, Nebraska might have a little bit of an edge in that sense, considering they have sold out their stadium basically every single game for, I don't even know, past 50 years. So crowd atmosphere is going to be electric for this game, especially with Michigan seeming like they're in a little bit of a rough spot, just kind of being a middle of the pack team record wise, but I think Michigan's going to rebound very nicely next season, giving the Cornhuskers a 30% chance to get a win at home against the Wolverines going into their first bye week.
Yeah, after that, they get to face Michigan State at home. And this Michigan State team, I think, has a lot of potential for next season. Aiden Childs in his freshman year was very raw, but you could see he has a lot of talent. And if Michigan State can really figure out a way to develop him and utilize him in the right way for his skill set, I think the Spartans could be a scary team for even some of the top teams in the Big Ten to play. The fact that this one's at home for Nebraska and it's kind of early on in the season, I still like the Cornhuskers at home. I think Dylan Raiola is just a little bit more experienced at this point, and he should be the better quarterback and end up being the difference maker in that game. It gets a little bit tougher after that with a road trip to Maryland. The Terps not expected to be one of the better teams in the Big Ten. Again, they'll probably be around 500 next year. So Nebraska should be favored on the road here. It's definitely a losable game, though, especially if they get caught looking ahead to Minnesota. Now, Minnesota is actually a team that we're very high on for next season. They've brought in a few really good transfers, and I think they're going to be a pretty solid team. The fact that they have home field advantage here, we're actually going to give a slight edge to the Golden Gophers in this one, but not out of the question for Nebraska to pull off a bit of an upset on the road at about a 40% chance for a Husker victory. Back at home to face Northwestern on October 25th. This game should be honestly not terribly difficult. 65% is about as high as Nebraska is going to get of a win probability for any Big Ten game because we do think they're probably going to be around the middle of the pack, maybe near the top of that. Home field advantage is going to add a few there, but I think that Nebraska, because they're at home and just talent wise, they're a little bit better, they should be able to pick up a win over this Northwestern team. Now, USC is the only home game, actually, other than Michigan, where we're going to have the road team favored just barely. I think USC is overall probably pretty similar to Nebraska next season. Um, it's definitely this is probably one of the toughest games on their schedule to actually pick. But I do think even with the home field advantage, Nebraska most likely is going to get upset by a team next year. And for right now, I would pick USC to be that game. After that, they have a road trip to UCLA, going to be the furthest that Nebraska has to travel all year. They do get a bye week after that, which is definitely going to be helpful because of what they have after that bye week. But Nebraska, they're the better team here, and they should be able to pick up a road victory over the Bruins.
Coming out of their final bye week, they will be going on the road to Happy Valley to face the Penn State Nittany Lions. This is a tough game coming out of that bye week. Sometimes bye weeks are good to rest and recover, but I think this is really going to hurt the Nebraska team because Happy Valley is going to be unbelievably loud for this game. I would expect probably hundreds of signs that have something to do with Patrick Mahomes on them. Maybe this could end up being like a sneaky good game, but Penn State has Drew Aller returning, Katron Allen returning, and Nicholas Singleton returning. That core returning on offense, along with getting some key transfers in the wide receiver position and getting Jim Knowles as their DC, is a recipe for a Penn State team that is looking to finally rival the strength of the best Big Ten teams like Ohio State, like Michigan, and like the new Big Ten teams like Oregon. So I don't give Dylan Raiola and Nebraska much of a chance in this one, giving them 20% chance to go into Happy Valley and get a win. Then they'll come back home for their final game of the season against Iowa. This it's an interesting game. We always know that Iowa turns out very good defenses. It's their bread and butter, has been for at least the last decade. And it should be pretty interesting with this Dylan Raiola-led team. Uh, I believe he's losing his top two receivers because they were both seniors last season. They could be coming back. I don't know for sure, but they'll have to replace them with some younger guys. And they did get some production out of their younger guys. But Iowa's big story is I don't even know who their quarterback is going into next season because it was Cade McNamara for a lot of the season last year, and he finished with just over 1,000 pass yards. And it was led primarily by Caleb Johnson at running back, who was going to the NFL draft. I don't see this Iowa offense being much of a threat. It really just comes down to can that defense set them up very well? And I don't think it's going to be that good of a game for Iowa, but you never know in this kind of a rivalry game. So giving the Cornhuskers a 60% chance to finish the season off with a win against the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, just taking a look at some of these bigger games here. I'm seeing four where Nebraska is not favored. And I could definitely see the Huskers finishing 8-4. I think if they did, though, most likely they're going to win one of those games where they're not the favorites. If I had to pick, it'd be either Minnesota or USC. And then I think they would drop another one where they are favored, potentially the season opener at Cincinnati, or maybe something like Michigan State. But realistically, I think we're going to see them lose all four of the games where they're not favored, as well as drop another one where they are. I've got Nebraska going 7-5.
Yeah, I think 7-5, 8-4 is probably where they're going to sit next season. Obviously, it just depends on if they can have the same success that they had last season. Because this Nebraska team, if a lot of people probably remember, this Nebraska team was essentially a interception away from beating Ohio State at the shoe. So they have the potential to compete in some of these big games, but I don't see them being able to compete with a Penn State team that is returning so much offensive talent, along with teams like Minnesota that were very high on that is starting to pick up some traction. I think Minnesota is starting to actually get the respect they deserve. A Michigan team that is looking to rebound from a mediocre season last year. I just think that 8-4 is the absolute highest they can go. And for that reason, I think 7-5 is probably where they're going to end up because I could see them losing, like you said, to a team like Michigan State at home or on the road against Cincinnati, or maybe even just that road trip out to UCLA just because it's so far. So I think 7-5 is a good prediction for this Cornhuskers team.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of like you were saying, they really did play a great game at Ohio State. But what's been keeping Nebraska from becoming that elite team is they only put that kind of game together really once or twice a year. Can they finally put that elite game together consistently? That's what could finally propel Nebraska to the college football playoff. I haven't seen it from them in previous years, so I have no reason to predict that they're actually going to be able to put everything together and probably play up to the team's full potential. Speaking of last season, we said that the Cornhuskers went 7-6. Our projection for this year is going to be 7.05 wins. And like we said, we are going to predict Nebraska in our way too early projections at 7-5. This is taking the under in the Vegas over under set at 7.5. Vegas likes the over just a little bit, favoring Nebraska most likely to go 8-4. But we really think this most likely scenario, most realistic, is a 7-5 Cornhuskers team in 2025. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.